At hand on Church of Uganda Family TV. My name is Tumwehe Bruno Edgard. Thank you for joining us. Now, as always, Issues at Hand is proudly brought to you by Protea Hotel Entebbe, and it is not too late to make a reservation and booking so that you can enjoy a wonderful time at Protea Hotel Entebbe. Yes, you can see the lush scenery and you can see what a wonderful place it is indeed, especially for people who want to have conferences, retreats, for people who want to have wedding receptions, or if you just want for the weekend to spend the night away from home with your children and with your family, then Protea Hotel is the place to be. Please make your reservation and booking today. The number is on the screen. Now, talking about family and children, it's very important that before our children return to school, that we continue to disciple them and that we continue to have a fantastic relationship with them. Now, something that's going to help us have a good relationship with our children is us as parents knowing that our children have rights and what rights and duties and obligations come with those rights. Yes, it's very important, and so we are talking about the protection of children's rights. That's what we are addressing this morning on Issues at Hand. And with me to have this discussion is Afande Tumwehe Amelia, who is the officer in charge of Child and Family Protection Unit, Nansana. You are very welcome to Issues at Hand.
Thank you, sir.
Good morning. Would you like to send any greetings to any
Family TV? My name is Assistant Superintendent of Police Tumwehe Amelia. I'm the in-charge Child and Family Protection Unit, Nansana Police Division.
Fantastic. So you're the right person to talk to when it comes to this discussion. Now, let us start proper by understanding. Now, I know that this question might seem strange for many of us because it seems like it's something that's common and general, but you will be shocked that there are some people who need to understand who exactly a child is. So let's start proper. Who is a child?
Of course, when we talk about a child, the child is any person who is below the age of 18 years, according to the Constitution of the Republic of Uganda.
Fantastic. Now we understand. And so if you are a family member, parent, father, mother, and you have someone in your care under the age of 18, that's a child. And so these rights that you're going to talk about pertain to that very child or children. And so as far as the Constitution and other laws are concerned, what are some of the important children's rights that we need to be aware of as parents?
Of course, maybe I think let me begin by defining the children's rights. Because when we talk about the children's rights, these are human rights entitled to all children, irrespective of their tribe, religion, age, and so forth. Of course, the rights of children are quite many. And one, any child has a right to, actually any child has a right to stay with his or her parent, unless if maybe the parents have died, then that's when the guardians come in. So for the viewers who are out there, so be aware that children are supposed to stay with their parents. Then secondly, of course, children are supposed to attain education, because we see that nowadays most children are not schooling, but of course it is the responsibility of us, the parents. So if you find a child who is not schooling, in other words, the parent will be denying the child their right. So any child is supposed to do what? He's supposed to attain education. Then
for going back to those two, and as we have this discussion, it's important to explain more about what these rights mean for us as parents. Now, you've mentioned that a child has the right to stay with his or her parents, and so it is incumbent upon us as parents to ensure that we are staying with our children. Otherwise, we'll find ourselves on the wrong side of the law. And of course, something else that we need to address here are issues of in case of separation or divorce. That's why court always addresses itself on custody, so that there is a parent that the child is staying with. But why is this right important? Why is it important that as parents we should stay with our children?
Okay, actually, like I said, when we talk about the rights, these are entitlements every child is supposed to attain. So I started with a right whereby I started by saying that every child, according to the Constitution of Uganda, a child is supposed to stay with his or parent, because we have seen that in most cases nowadays, there are those parents who just produce children and they desert them. And yet, in actual sense, the parents are the ones who are supposed to take care of them, not just abandoning them to the community or the public. So it is incumbent upon us, the parents, to see that we take care of our children whom we have produced.
All right. Apart from the right to stay with parents, the rights to education, what other rights do
then sadly
for under the law?
Children are supposed to be accommodated by the parents. Of course, it is also the responsibility of parents and the guardians who stay with the children. The parents are supposed to make sure that they provide shelter to the children they stay with. Of course, a child cannot grow when he or she is maybe left abandoned.
All right. And other rights, you can continue going on with the explanations.
Then children also have a right. Children have a right to be protected from any form of discrimination, irrespective of sex, irrespective of their sex, tribe, culture, social background, etc. Because we have seen that in most cases children are being discriminated. And it is so common here, most especially in Kampala. You find that most of the children are at the streets, and yet these children are supposed to be in their homes.
Okay. Continue. Any other rights that we should know about?
Then we also have a right to violence and abuse. You see that nowadays children are most especially abused by the people they stay with. For instance, many children have been defiled by their parents. It is so common nowadays, you find that a parent defiles his or her own daughter, which is not the case. So, and we see that these children are supposed to be in safe homes. So if you find a parent defiling her own daughter, for sure.
It's terrible. It's terrible, and we are going to get into some of the causes, the reasons as to why some of the perpetrators carry out such abuse of children's rights, and we're going to also find out about what you're also going to explain to us what the consequences of not giving these rights, of not following up and enforcing these rights are. Any other rights that we should know about?
Then you also have a right to be protected from any social or customary practices that are dangerous to the child health. For instance, we normally see in the suburban areas where you find that girls are mutilated, and yet it's not the case, because by doing so they are violating their rights. Then you also have a right to protection from hazardous or injurious employment, which interferes with the child's health, education, mental, physical, or moral development. You see that you find that nowadays children are given work, which is you find that a child below the age of 18 years is doing a lot of work instead of concentrating on education, but you find that someone is busy at work doing house chore work, which is not the case.
So things like child labor are illegal when it comes to the law, because but when it comes to child labor, of course the labor laws pronounce themselves on the fact that, well, we have to raise children who are hardworking, so they can do light work, but they are not supposed to do the hard labor work that some parents make their children do. That one is illegal when it comes to the law.
Yeah.
Can you give us some experiences you've had as an officer, especially in charge of the Child and Protection Unit, some of the experiences you've had with some of these rights, especially the abuse of them?
Actually, I've handled many cases, I could say. You find that someone, a child of, say, like 10 years, was brought from the village to come here to work in Kampala, in a family of like 10 people. And in most cases, you find that when these children are being brought, at times, the parents of the victims are not aware. The perpetrator works with other people to get this child. You find that the parent is in the village of the victim, but the parent is not aware of where her child is. So in the long run, you find that these children at times, they run away from these homes. Because you can imagine a child of 10 years working for people who are like 10 people. This child cannot really do that work. In the end, this child will be forced to run away from such a home. So actually, we have handled many at police stations. And in such situations, of course, our work is to rescue them. Of course, by working with other people like the probation officers, these children are supposed to be rescued and taken back to their homes.
Are there any other rights that we need to be aware of when it comes to children's rights? Actually,
we also have a right to, children are supposed to have names. Why do we give out names to people? Of course, for his identification. So any child is supposed to be given a name for purposes of his identification. Even you yourself, you have a name.
That's true.
Yeah.
Any other rights?
Then you also have a right to clothing, like any other person puts on clothes. That's why you see that immediately a child is born, the parents are supposed to to clothe these children. So it is also a right to them.
So the children who are walking around without clothes, their rights are being abused. I hope you know.
Of course, absolutely, yeah.
I hope you know that now, and that's why it's important to have such a conversation, because some of us as parents, there are some things we are doing, we might not know we are breaking the law, but we are actually breaking the law. Remember, the law also says ignorance of the law is no defense. So
yeah.
For those of you who are but don't mind having your children express a freestyle, and now you know that it's important that children are clothed.
Then we also have a right to privacy. Of course, children are supposed to be protected. Of course, it is the government to protect them, more especially those who are being abused. Of course, the government has to come in.
What do you mean by a right to privacy when it comes to children? Because many of us as parents, when your child is in their room alone, sometimes get worried that they may not be doing the right thing, so we have to keep monitoring them. So what does privacy for a child entail?
Of course, maybe I can give you an example, like there are those children who commit crimes. So like for such a children, when such a child is brought to police, we are not supposed to do what? To disclose him or her. So we are supposed to do what? To see that he or she is protected. Actually, that child is not supposed to be put in camera, because he or she much has committed a crime, but we have to see that is protected from privacy.
Wow, that's interesting. Now you can see that there are rights that are very important when it comes to children. I have also, it's important to learn new things every day. I did not know that children have a right to privacy, but there you go, they do. And now you see why it's important when it comes to discussions like sharing photos of other people's children on social media, because you are abusing that very right. So that's very wonderful. Anymore?
Then children also have a right to access information. For instance, it is also their right to watch TVs, read books, go on internet, and so forth.
So it reminds me of many times, well, in my childhood and other stories I've heard of parents who are very tough, having a no TV policy. Now you can see that for those of you who are doing it, you are abusing the rights of these children. You see, that's why it's important to have this discussion. And here on Issues at Hand, we're always working hard to discuss certain issues. And now we are getting a lot of enlightenment from Afande Amelia. Are there more rights that we need to be aware of?
And also, children are supposed to be protected from sexual abuse. Like as I told you in the beginning, you find that nowadays, most especially the perpetrators have turned out to be the parents. And yet, it is the responsibility of the parents who are supposed to see that children are kept in a safe place, rather than misusing, rather than denying their rights. So, actually, you see that nowadays, many children have been defiled by both the parents and the relatives.
All right, and that is very key, especially when it comes to fighting things like gender-based violence. It starts with us recognizing that that children have the right to be protected against sexual violence. Now, when it comes to the protection of rights, these rights that you are mentioning for us, who is responsible for enforcing them?
Of course, it is the government, and when it comes to the government, it is us police to see that the laws are enforced.
Is it only the government and police, or parents as well?
Of course, the parents as well.
All right, and what duties and obligations spring up due to these rights as prescribed by the law?
Of course, the obligations are many, because the children themselves, they have the obligations. One, the children are not supposed to commit crimes, because we have seen that in most cases, of course, there are children who are committing crimes, and the law is very clear. The moment you clock 12 years and above, you are criminally responsible. So when you commit a crime, if you are 12 years, you will be held responsible, because we have even prisons for young children. Then also, as the children, they have an obligation to respect their parents, the elderly people, and the other people in the community, including even the people at their schools.
Are there other obligations as well, apart from those?
Of course, as an obligation, the children also have obligation to do house work. You see that nowadays, most of the children, we are in holidays, you find that a child is on TV from morning up to evening, much as they are maids, but we as the parents, we also need to give out work to these children.
Yes, so that we can disciple them to be hardworking, and so those are some of the duties and obligations that spring and manifest from these rights that have been shared. Now, also on the subject of children's rights, when it comes to abuse of rights, what are the sanctions that follow the abuse of these children's rights? And we're going to talk about some of these instances of abuse, but I'd like you to warn those who might think that they have the capacity to abuse these rights.
I beg your pardon?
What are the sanctions that follow, penalties? What happens to a person who abuses these children's rights? For example, when it comes to sexual violence, a parent who carries out the abuse of that right to protect a child from sexual violence, what does the law do to that person?
Of course, we have different laws. When someone commits a crime like of sexual abuse, we have like defilement. Of course, police has to do its work. One, maybe actually the process is a bit long. For instance, if a child is defiled, immediately that child is supposed to be taken to police and the criminal case is lodged up. Then thereafter, it is us, the police, to make sure that this victim goes for medical attention. Then thereafter, of course, we are supposed to carry out investigations. We are supposed to go to the field and find out what really happened. Then after compiling all that, of course, the perpetrators are supposed to be arrested and held accountable.
Speaking of perpetrators, who are, in your experience, who are the usual perpetrators when it comes to child abuse?
Of course, the usual perpetrators are normally the family members. We have family members, neighbors, then and other people within our communities.
And talking about child abuse, something that I want us to center on is child torture, because we've seen in Uganda it's an ongoing problem, and that's something that needs to be addressed. There are many issues: gender-based violence, there is the abuse of the right of education, like you said, but something that is very startling is child torture. What is child torture, and what are some of the forms of child torture?
Okay, when we talk of child torture refers to the deliberate infliction of severe pain on a child. And of course, we have torture is in different forms. For instance, we have the physical form. And of course, when we are talking about the physical torture includes assaulting someone. For instance, we have beating, pushing someone, strangling, kicking, boxing, and so forth. That is under physical torture. Then we also have what we call mental torture, or maybe I could call it psychological torture. And of course, the psychological torture normally comes from the physical torture. For instance, when someone beats you, at the end of it all, this child, remember, they are not good at forgetting. That thing will keep on haunting that child, and the child will never forget it.
Are there other forms apart from mental and physical?
Actually, we have sexual torture. Of course, when we talk about sexual torture, we have things like defilement, rape, child-to-child sex. All those are under sexual torture.
Right, and what is the driving force behind this rise in child torture? Why are we seeing so many cases of child torture in our society today?
Of course, you find that nowadays most of the people are using drugs. Someone will take in drug.
Do you mean the parents? Do you mean family members?
Of course, it could even mean the parents, because we have seen in most cases, you find that a parent is taking marijuana. Because after the parent has taken marijuana, at the end of it all, he will end up going into, using his daughter instead of using adults.
And also some of the driving forces, I up to now, a lot of people say that when it comes to families, they have still been shaken by the COVID-19 pandemic in the guise that during the lockdown, a lot of parents did not know what to do with their children, and because of frustration and other reasons, they ended up having scuffles with their children, beating children, and even we saw that there were many young girls, unfortunately, who were impregnated by their own parents, by their own fathers. And so that is also an issue as well. Is that a trend that is continuing, that there is continuing to be a lot of beating, especially, and things like gender-based violence when it comes to many families?
Actually, during COVID time, cases of gender-based violence were many. And like nowadays, remember those days, I think to me the reason as to why cases were a bit high, people were not working. They would stay at home, and each person would see the other person's mistake. So in the end, people would end up committing crimes. And like nowadays, where at least now people are working, so when you try to compare, cases have reduced compared to the period of COVID-19.
Indeed. And so what can we do? One, as parents, 2 as police, and 3 as government, to ensure that this trend of child torture goes down? That
Of course,
vice out of our society.
as a parent, actually it is our role to educate our children. When if you are a parent and you see that your child is committing a crime, it is your duty to see that your child doesn't commit such crimes. You as a parent, you need to talk to your children. Then, for us as a community, I mean as the government, our role is to enforce laws. That's why you see that when a person commits a crime, of course, police has to come in.
Indeed, and as a lady who is in leadership when it comes to Uganda Police, can you take us through what gender-based violence is and some of its forms?
When we talk about gender-based violence refers to any act which is perpetrated on an individual, and of course at the end of it all, it causes mental torture. That's what I could say briefly. I mean in brief. And
is it specifically based on the fact that on the gender of the child? Because we have seen a lot of gender-based violence is especially perpetrated against girls, young girls, but I've also seen the issue of boys who have been sexually abused and tortured by people in society.
Of course, what I could say, most of the victims of gender-based violence are women and girls, but of course there are also men who have been violated by their rights by women, but the biggest percentage are the girls and the women.
And as a police officer, how do you handle such a sensitive matter? Because for many, especially when it's a family member that's the perpetrator, how do you tackle that issue, especially sensitive?
Of course, there are different forms on the way how we handle such cases. One, of course, when a person is violated of his or her rights, and he or she has come to police, the first thing is we first listen from him or her. Then thereafter, in case if you find out that this person indeed has been violated of his or her rights, you have to advise the victim to lodge up a complaint. Then in case if the violence was physical, you have to advise the victim to first go for medical examination. Then thereafter, in case if there were witnesses who were there by the time the person was being violated of his or her rights, you advise the person to bring witnesses for statement recording. Then thereafter, we arrest the perpetrator, we interrogate him, then at the end of it all, we compile our files and forward them to court for perusal and legal advice.
Now, when you are discussing the duties and obligation of children, especially when it comes to children's rights, something you mentioned is the duty to ensure they don't commit crimes, especially for children who are 12 years and above. And we would like to understand, because there are many parents who are dealing with rowdy children and they don't know what to do. So as far as police is concerned, what is the process when it comes to a child who has committed a crime? What happens? And because that child is below the age of 18, what is the process of... Because I had a discussion with someone from another Afande who was talking about depending on the offense, talking with the child, having mediation, explaining to the child the consequences of what they had done, and sort of counseling them. But we know there are other major offenses that can be committed by children. So how does police handle these situations?
Actually, it depends, because like in a situation where maybe a child has committed a crime and he or she is above 12 years and above, first of all, when such a case is reported against such a child and the child is brought to police, of course it is us, the police, we are supposed to call the parents from both sides. Then from there after, we do sit with both parties, both from the perpetrator side and from the victim side. Then thereafter, we try to do mediation. Then in a situation where mediation and counseling has failed and maybe said like the complainant is insisting that he or she wants her case to go up to court, of course there we have no option. The last option is to send the file to court.
So does the mediation, for example, and sending the file to court, does it depend on the offense, or is it a general process, whatever, even if, for instance, the offense is murder in case a child has killed someone?
Actually, it depends on the offenses committed, because there are those offenses which are minor and there are those which are capital in nature. Of course, if it is minor, like someone, maybe a child has beaten a neighbor's child, then there we can first do the mediation. But of course, if it is murder, that one is beyond us.
Indeed. And what is your advice then to people watching when it comes to children's rights? What should we do now? Like you said, the people who have the responsibility to enforce this are is government, Uganda Police, but as parents, what should we be very keen on when it comes to protecting children's rights?
Of course, as parents, one, by the way, what parents need to know, also children have issues, because there are those parents who don't want to listen to their children. You find that a child is suffering, but the parent doesn't want to listen from a child. So as parents out there, you also listen from your children, because children also have issues. Don't just send them away, because if you send them away, who is going to listen to them?
What else should parents be?
Then secondly, parents should give guidance and counseling, because it is also their role. When a child has maybe committed a crime or is doing something wrong, it is the role of a parent to sit with his or her child and talk to him or her.
We have had a lot of fruitful discussions when it comes to some of the rights that we need to pay attention to. For instance, we have to pay attention to the fact that as parents, children have the right to stay with their parents, so we have to ensure that we are living with our parents, with our children, and then also children have the right to education, and so it is incumbent upon us as parents and government to ensure that right is enforced, and so many others. But talking about protection of children's rights, there is an ongoing issue that also affects children, but also affects families as a whole, and that is the issue of domestic violence, which we are getting into right now. So Afande, what is domestic violence? We have seen a lot of families struggle with this issue. It has been a big talking point, and every day it seems like there's a worse case of domestic violence happening somewhere in this country. So what is it, and what are the forms of domestic violence?
Of course, in a brief, domestic violence is any harmful act which is perpetrated against a person's will, and this is based on social, cultural identities, namely roles, expectations, limitations, and myths. Then when we talk about domestic violence, of course, it is also a bit lengthy. Domestic violence is in different forms, but you find that in most cases, people know the physical violence. But however, what I would say, actually we have different forms. One being physical. And when we talk about physical violence, this is direct pain or injury inflicted on somebody. So under physical violence, we have things like burning. Maybe when someone gets hot and he or she burns you, of course, that falls under physical violence. We have cutting. Someone gets a pang or a knife, pierces you. Then you have boxing. Then we have strangling, because we have seen in most cases women have been strangled in families. We have kicking, slapping, pushing. All those fall under physical violence. Then we have what we call emotional or psychological violence. And by this we mean harm which injures somebody's mind. Then under this we have things like threats, abuses, nicknames, harassment, abuses, and so forth. For instance, you find that in a home, a man and a woman, because in the first place there is love, but it reaches a time when people are no longer in love. Someone comes back, the woman welcomes the husband back. Welcome back. For instance, the woman welcomes back the husband, and the husband just decides to keep quiet. More so, you may find that the woman has prepared food at home. For you, the husband, when you go back home, you decide not to eat. Of course, in the end, it will pain your wife. Then we have what we call economic violence. Economic violence, maybe in simple terms, it refers to pain most especially caused on finances. For instance, nowadays, maybe you find a lady working, you decide to marry her, you take her to your home. When she reaches there, you tell the woman, for me, I'm the owner of the family in my home, you are not supposed to work. Remember, you are not going to provide each and everything to her. And forgetting that also her parents educated her. She also has her needs which you cannot fulfill. Then you have also seen a denial of properties. You find that a woman may be like the working ladies. She has her properties or assets somewhere, but there are those men who want to deny their wives their properties. Then we have, like as I said, denying a person to work. You don't want a person to work. In the end, that person will be tortured economically. Then you also have, maybe under economic violence, another example which I can give you, like for the working ladies, a person is working, then at the end of it all, actually it is the man who keeps her ATM. When the month ends, the husband goes to the ATM, withdraws the whole amount of money, and it is the man now who uses this money. So of course that is economic abuse. Then we have what we call sexual violence. Or maybe when we talk about sexual violence, or maybe in simple terms, it is the unlawful demand for sexual act. For instance, we have cases like rape, defilement, and unnatural offenses like sodomy, denial of sex, marital rape, etc.
Those are many big issues, and if we had that time, we would go through them one by one. But it's important to remember that they all fall under the purview of domestic violence. Now, in order to curb such vices in society, we need to understand what the effects of these vices are on the family, on children, and on our country as well, because the first unit of a country is a family. And so what are the effects of domestic violence?
Because domestic violence has many effects. One, we have seen loss of lives. Many people have lost their lives, including you. You have seen many people who have died out of domestic violence. Like nowadays, people fight so much, especially like during the period of COVID, people would fight. And actually during that time, we registered many cases of murder rising out of domestic violence.
That's of spouses killing each other.
Yeah. Then we have also seen people have become disabled. You find that a person went for marriage when he or she was normal, but at the end of it, you find that someone has lost his eyes. So domestic violence, what I could say, it has long-term effects. Then you have seen children dropping out of school. Like the Waganda say, how do they call it? Actually, we have seen children dropping out of school. When there is violence in a home, at the end of it all, it will affect the children, whether we want or not. Because whenever there is violence in a home, children will be affected psychologically. That's why at times you find that when parents are fighting, you'll find also young children also maybe at the side also crying. Then you have also seen children running out of their homes. Like if you yourself, you could carry out a research on these children who are on the streets. Most of them are there simply because they are those who ran out from homes whereby parents were were having violence, and they opted to do what? To run away. Then you also have poverty. Of course, if in a home where people are fighting on daily basis, you cannot expect such people to develop, because you'll find that people have fault. Then at the end of it all, maybe they have gone to the LOCs, they are police, they have gone to courts. Instead of using that time to do other developmental work, they will be handling their cases. So what I could say, in a home where there is violence, of course, you cannot expect such people to develop. Then we have also seen an increase of street children. Actually, I think I had already talked about. Then there is also divorce, because we have seen many people separating.
Indeed, and those are very, very, very stark cause effects, and they essentially break down the family unit, which is very, very dangerous, because if you talk about children, what will happen if a child drops out of school is very, very, very pivotal indeed, because many of these children get into drug abuse. Some, like you said, become street children. Some get involved in crime, and so something the reality of domestic violence is that it has a lot of consequences that affect very many other people in society. Now, those are the effects, but we want to understand what is the cause of this domestic violence when it comes to families in our Ugandan societies.
The causes of domestic violence, of course, are quite many. One, maybe I would begin by poverty. Nowadays, most people are poor. You find that maybe, for instance, a man is not working and a woman is working. How do you expect such people to develop? Tomorrow, when such a woman maybe asks for sugar at home, the man, instead of the man providing, he or she will do what? He will end up beating the woman, because we have seen such instances. Maybe the man refused the woman to work. When the woman maybe is asking for something, the man is like, leave me, you go away. Then you have also seen religion is one of the causes of domestic violence. For instance, I could give you an example. Maybe if for instance, you are a Muslim and you marry someone who is a Christian, remember, when you are getting each other, for you a Muslim man, you will tell your woman, I want you to be converted. The woman accepts. Then in the long run, the woman will be like, I'm not ready to convert. Of course, in the end, these two people will end up separating or even fighting, because we have also seen many. So religion is also key. Then we have poor parenting. Of course, if maybe a child grows up in a family where parents are fighting on a daily basis, the children will also grow up knowing that fighting is part and parcel of what? Actually, on the case of poor parenting, the cycle will continue. That's why you find that these people who commit crimes, when you carry out your research properly, these people grew up in families where there was violence. Then you also have political differences. Maybe for you, you are in NRM, you have a wife who is in NOP. At the end of that day, you will fail to do what? You will fail to agree. Because for you, you are in a different party, and your wife is also in a different party. Because we have also seen such. Then we have also different in income earnings. For instance, where maybe a woman is earning much more income than a man, these two at times they will fail to do what? To agree in a home. Such women will not even be submissive to their wives. Of course, I'm not saying that they are all not submissive. There are those whereby you will find a woman is earning much more income than a man. In most cases, you find that in the long run, these two people will fail to do what? Actually, they will fail to team up. Then the end result will be, of course, maybe violence. Then you also have technology. For instance, nowadays most people spend their time on WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, whatever.
Which leads to a lack of quality time.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the issue of domestic violence, what is the role of police when it comes to stemming this issue?
Actually, the role of police, one is to do sensitization, like what I'm doing now. Our work is we have to go to the communities and sensitize to the community. Of course, most people are not aware. Then we also do community policing. Of course, the role of community policing is to make that people are aware of the laws and the cases which are committed in the different crimes. Then our role is to follow up cases. When someone has reported a case at police, it is our role to see that these cases are followed up. Then you also have a role to arrest and prosecute the perpetrators of domestic violence. Then on top of that, we also do elementary counseling and mediation. When people come, of course, we are supposed to talk to both parties, listen to them. Then at the end of it all, of course, it is our role to advise them on what they are supposed to do.
Indeed. Now that's the role of police. Now, in closing, in your final remarks, please, what is our role as community members, as family members, as parents, when it comes, and as husbands, as wives as well, when it comes to stopping this issue of domestic violence?
Actually, we have different roles. For instance, the parents, of course, they have a role to listen to each other. Like as we said, children also have issues. As a parent, they need to listen to their children. Then also at the same time as adults, they also need to listen from one another, because there are those parties which don't want to listen. So if you're a man, you also need to listen from your wife. Likewise, the wife is also supposed to listen from her husband. And also communication is also key when we have issues at home. Because if you don't air out your issues, how will the other party know that maybe you're suffering? So in case if you have any issue, it is also your role to issue out to your partner. In case if your partner maybe has refused to listen, and then there you go to other different stakeholders. And the stakeholders, for instance, we have the LOCs. Because at least each village has an LOC committee comprising of around 7 to 9 people. So when you have an issue, you can as well go to the LOC, they will listen to you. Then in a situation where they fail to handle, you will be referred either to police or judiciary.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Tumwehe Amelia, for taking us through the protection of children's rights and the different rights that need protection and need enforcement as well. And thank you for taking us through domestic violence as well. And that helps us renew our minds as community members and as families to ensure that we continue to protect our children. Our children are thriving and they grow up to be people who are going to lead to the development of this country. It's upon us, it's upon me, it's upon you, it's upon government, it's upon police, it's upon all of us to play our respective roles to ensure that our children are safe and are enjoying their rights that are not only provided for by law, but that are also given by God. So let's be good stewards as parents and protect our children and enforce the rights that God has given them, so that they will grow up to be responsible people who are serving the country and who are serving the Lord. Thank you for joining us on Issues at Hand this Friday morning. We shall return on Monday. For now, have a lovely weekend and God richly bless you.